My name is Gideon and this is my story. I grew up during the rule of the Midianite Empire, which was a cruel and terrible regime. They strangled our people with their iron control, leaving my people devastated and broken. However, that was our downfall. My people had sinned against the Lord in many different ways. As a result, the Lord handed us over to the control of the Midianites for 7 years. Due to the brutality of the Midianites, we were forced to build castles, caves and mountains as hiding places for ourselves, in order to survive. Whenever the Israelites sold their crops, invaders from Midian, Amalek, and the people of the east attacked our land, camping on the land and destroying the crops. They left my people with nothing to eat, taking all the sheep, goats, cattle and donkeys. These hostile hordes, arriving with their animals and tents, were dense like a swarm of locusts. They came in bands of camels that were too many to count. They remained there until the region was completely plundered. The Midianites were a desert people and dominated my people due to their effective use of camels. Because of their mistakes, our work was in vain. In the end, all their products and livestock were stolen after they worked hard to bring them to fruition. Sin does this, it robs us of what we worked hard to conquer. Many accomplished men lose everything in life because they do not stop their sins. Everything is lost in order to gain what, in retrospect, seems to be nothing. Because of the Midianites, my people are currently on the brink of famine. Faced with a long period of humiliation, fruitless work, poverty, and a superior enemy, my people cried out to the Lord God for help. When they cried out to the Lord because of Midian, the Lord sent a prophet to the Israelites. The prophet I am sending you. I was just an ordinary man, unsure of my own abilities. I couldn't see myself as someone who could do great things for the Lord God. I considered myself insignificant, insecure. I asked, "But how can I rescue Israel? My clan is the weakest of the entire tribe of Manasseh, and I am the youngest in my entire family." Then the one man said to me, "I will be with you and you will destroy the Midianites as if you were fighting against one man." Can you believe it? I was about to embark on a strange journey, and my journey would begin with an impossible task. This is a huge empire, a world power, and I should defeat them like a one-person wrestling match. Who I am? Who am I to face the powerful Midianites? Could this be an angel of the Lord in front of me? How should I know? I will test him with an offering. It is not wrong to ask for a confirming sign. Makes sense. If this is truly the Lord, he should reveal it to me. I responded to him, "If I have found any favor in your eyes, show me a sign that it is you who speaks with me. Please do not leave here until I return to you and bring my offering and place it before you." And he answered, "I will wait until you return." In a hurry, I returned home. I prepared a young goat, and using a basket of flour and a little water, I baked bread without using yeast. Then, carrying the meat in a basket and the broth in a pot, I carried them outside and handed them to the stranger who was standing under the big tree at that time. The man told me, "Place the meat and unleavened bread on this rock and pour the broth over it," and I did as I was told. Then the man touched the meat and the bread with the tip of the staff in his hand, and the fire came up from the rock and consumed everything he had brought, and he disappeared. When I realized that it was the angel of the Lord, I cried out, "Ah, sovereign Lord! I am doomed. I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face." This miracle of the fire, along with the other aspects of this entire experience, convinced me that this was all from the Lord. The appearance of the angel of the Lord was completely human in character. But the Lord answered, "It's okay, don't be afraid, you won't die." So I built an altar to the Lord there, and I named it Yahweh Shalom, which means, "The Lord is peace." The altar remains in Afra. An altar is any structure on which offerings, such as sacrifices, are made for religious purposes. It was a raised platform with a flat surface. An altar was a common practice in my time. Even our ancestor Noah built an altar to the Lord after leaving the ark. In some instances, God himself instructed the construction of an altar after performing a miraculous act of deliverance. The purpose of such an altar was to serve as a memorial and help future generations remember the great works of the Lord. The law determined that any altar made of stones must be built using natural, uncut stones, since using tools on the stones would desecrate them. Now I had built one. I did it as an act of adoration and consecration to the Lord, with whom I had just had a face-to-face encounter. my aid. I also sent messengers throughout the territories of Manasseh, Asher, Zebulun and Naphtali to summon their respective warriors, and they all responded. Due to that divine empowerment, I managed to gather an impressive number of troops in a short time. 32,000 men came to follow me into battle. This is still a powerful company. Before leaving, I needed to make sure that it was really God who sent me. He needed a second miracle to confirm his word. He was not a chivalrous man. I was raised as the youngest in my family, and my clan was also the youngest. Isn't this something I do every day? Will people really follow a humble man like me? Yes, the Lord gave me a sign, but I needed another. I will do a test that only the Lord can perform. I told God, if you're really going to use me to rescue Israel, like you promised, try it this way. Tonight I will place a wool fleece in the refrigerator. If in the morning the fleece is wet with dew, but the ground is dry, I will know that you will help me rescue Israel, as you promised. And that's exactly what happened. When I got up early the next morning, I squeezed out the fleece and filled an entire bowl with water. However, that didn't really change anything. I needed something more. Before being too critical of me, you should consider the challenge that was in front of me. Many would immediately reject such a call without even considering allowing God to confirm. My little faith was still greater than no faith. So I said to God, please don't be angry with me, but let me make one more request. Use the fleece for one more test. This time, leave the fleece dry, while the ground around it is wet with dew. So that night, God did as I asked. The fleece was dry in the morning, but the ground was covered with dew. That was all I needed to know. I was ready. Jared S. Fountain. The Midian armies were camped north of them, in the valley near Mount Moor. The Lord told me, you have too many warriors with you. If I let all of you fight against the Midianites, the Israelites will boast that they saved themselves by their own strength. Therefore, tell the people, anyone who is afraid or frightened can leave this mountain and go home. Now, this was a great test of my faith. My army of 32,000 men was already at a disadvantage against the 135,000 Midianites. Still, God thought my army was too big. Then, 22,000 men went home, leaving only 10,000 ready to fight. I was left with only 10,000 men. The sight of a huge enemy army caused many Israelite soldiers to fear. Most of the men were really scared. Now the odds were 13-1. But the Lord told me, there are still too many, take them to the fountain, and I will test them there to determine who will go with you and who will not. When I led my warriors to the water, the Lord told me, divide the men into 2 groups. In a group, place all those who collect water in their hands and drink it with their tongues, like dogs. In the other group, place all those who kneel and drink with their mouths in the stream. This seemed like a peculiar test. Perhaps it was because those who carried water in their hands and brought it to their mouths were better soldiers, as they kept their eyes on their surroundings, even when drinking. Only 300 of the men drank from his hands. Everyone else knelt and drank with their mouths from the stream. Then the Lord said to me, with these 300 men I will rescue you and give you victory over the Midianites. Send everyone else home. The Lord God wanted the odds to be so bad that victory would clearly be his. We rarely think that size can be an impediment to God's work. However, it is more difficult to truly trust God when we have many wonderful resources at hand. So, I collected the supplies and ram's horns from the other warriors and sent them home, but I kept the 300 men with me. God assured me that victory was certain, even now with only 300 men. Now, Israel's army was less than 1% of its original size, and the ratio was 400 Midianite soldiers for every Israelite soldier. He could only trust in the Lord God, as there was nothing else to trust. I'm here now. The Midianite camp was in the valley, just below me. That night the Lord said, "Get up, go down to the Midianite camp. For I have given you victory over them. But if you are afraid to attack, go down to the camp with your pure servant. Listen to what the Midianites are saying, and you will be very encouraged. After that, you'll be eager to attack." I was afraid, so I took my servant and went to the edge of the enemy camp. Now he was in the enemy camp, still afraid. The armies of Midian, Amalek, and the people of the east had settled in the valley like a swarm of locusts. Their camels were like grains of sand on the seashore, too many to count. I approached at the exact moment when a man was telling his companion about a dream he had had. The man said, "I had this dream, and in my dream a barley loaf was rolling down, entering the Midianite camp. It hit a tent, flipping it over and flattening it." His companion replied, "Your dream can only mean one thing. God has given Gideon, son of Joash, the Israelite, victory over Midian and all his allies. God allowed me to see a great confirmation of his future work." This was obviously no coincidence or a stroke of luck. God used the situation to build my faith, and it worked very well. It was not by chance that the man dreamed that night, nor that he told his friend at that moment, nor that I arrived at the exact place where I heard the man telling the dream. Even my enemies were filled with fear. When we are weak in faith, we often make our enemies stronger than they really are. In fact, when I heard the dream and its interpretation, I bowed in worship before the Lord. God wanted me to find encouragement in that visit to the enemy camp. This shows that when the Lord God asks us to do difficult things for Him, He does not sit back and expect us to do everything alone. He is there to guide us, sustain us, and encourage us all the time. Then I returned to the Israelite camp and shouted, "Get up, for the Lord has given you victory over the Midianite hordes." I divided the 300 men into 3 groups and gave each man a ram's horn and a clay jar with a torch inside. My faith was contagious. Having received encouragement, I couldn't help but spread that encouragement to others, and my encouragement built their faith. I told them, "Keep your eyes on me. When you reach the edge of the camp, do exactly as I do. As soon as I and those with me blow the ram's horns, blow their horns also throughout the camp and shout, 'For the Lord and for Gideon.'" It was shortly after midnight, after the changing of the guard, when I and the 100 men with me arrived at the edge of the Midianite camp. Suddenly we blew our ram's horns and broke our earthenware jars. Then, the 3 groups blew their horns and broke their jugs. We held the burning torches in our left hands and the horns in our right, and we all shouted, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." That shout was not a result of pride, but showed wisdom in the attack. Clearly, the Midianites were already frightened by Gideon's sword, and shouting helped send them into panic. The Midianite soldiers woke up to an explosion of noise, light, and movement, coming from all directions. Each man stood his ground around the camp and watched as all the Midianites ran in panic, screaming as they fled. When the 300 men blew their ram's horns, the Lord caused the warriors in the camp to fight each other with their swords. Those who were not killed fled to distant places. The first phase of the battle was not between Israel and Midian, but when the Midianites fought among themselves. Then I sent messengers to the warriors of Naphtali, Asher, and Manasseh, who joined in the pursuit of the Midianite army. I also sent messengers throughout the hill country of Ephraim saying, "Go down to attack the Midianites, and cut off their roads at the crossings of the Jordan River at Bethavara." Although God had begun the work with a small number of soldiers, once the battle began, He wanted many to be involved in the task. So all the men of Ephraim did as they were ordered. They captured the 2 Midianite commanders, Horeb and Sib, and executed them. We continued to persecute the Midianites. Then the people of Ephraim questioned me, "Why did you treat us like this? Why didn't you call us when you first went to fight the Midianites? They argued heatedly with me. But I responded, What have I achieved compared to you? Are not even the leftovers of Ephraim's crops better than the entire harvest of my little clan of Abiezer? God gave them victory over Horeb and Sib, commanders of the Midianite army. What have I achieved compared to that? When the men of Ephraim heard my answer, their anger subsided. The men of Ephraim seemed to care more about recognition than the general good of Israel. Instead of being jealous of the recognition others received, they should have been happy that God's people were rescued and that they had some share in the victory. Zeal often hinders God's work. I did not challenge their pride, but rather calmed their pride, praising them and giving them the recognition they seemed to desire. More importantly, I challenged them to get involved in God's work that was ongoing. My response was a wise way to handle strife when there was work for the Lord to do. Then I crossed the Jordan River with my 300 men.